Hello, Empower, and welcome to Adam Stevens from Intelligent Eating. Thank you so much for being with us. It's really great to have you on. So yeah, the clues in the title, Intelligent Eating. So you're a nutrition expert, and I love consuming your content, and I thought that our members would love it as well. So thank you. And if you could give yourself a better intro than I have done, that would be awesome.
Well, thank you, Sarah. I don't know if I could get so many puns in there about food, actually. So actually, I don't know if I can give you a better intro, but I can tell you briefly. It's Intelligent Eating was born in 2011 on the back of really a horrible event, which was my stepfather basically dropped dead. Now that sounds really harsh and a really brutal way to introduce myself, but that's what happened. And this stuff happens all the time. Men in their 60s and women in the 60s as well, just drop dead for no reason, or we think it's no reason. Now, that was kind of part of my motivation behind this, and what I mean by that is, I questioned that. I thought, why would that happen to somebody who is, in pretty good shape, thinks they eat well, doesn't really drink very much, doesn't smoke, and so on. And yet in these westernized industrial countries that we live in, that's deemed as normal for people to have heart attacks. And my questioning was, you don't see this in zebras that don't have heart attacks, and lions and giraffes, or, penguins. I don't know. So why is it happening here? So really what I'm doing is I'm looking at this and going, what's going on? That's what Intelligent Eating was about. And when I looked at this from a root cause analysis, my background's physics, and I won't go too much into that, but the sort of root cause analysis is saying, rather than saying, oh, well, that worked for one person, so it must work for another, it's more looking at it going, well, what's actually the data behind it? It's, people go, oh, we have all this disease because of stress or because of lack of sleep or whatever. And those things, don't get me wrong, for sure, play a part. But I was interested in, well, does what we eat play a part? And it turns out it plays a huge part. It's arguably the most influential. They all go together for sure. But so that's really what got me interested in it. And I sort of started to pick up people who really basically in round 11, of their boxing match against these horrible diseases that we will all know people that have suffered with and sadly perished with, whether it's heart disease or type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure or high cholesterol, and these things just bubble away in the background. And as people get older, they become basically a cost to society rather than a contribution to society. So that's really the sort of mission behind what I'm doing, is to make sure that we get old young, basically, if that makes sense.
Yeah. That's what health is all about, really, isn't it? It's kind of the slowest way to die with the least implications and complications, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. That's
I always say that we help people to add healthy years to their life. I mean, there's no point living a long life if you're riddled with complications, and it's really hard work. But I think, yeah, like you do it from a different perspective, exactly the same thing. And yeah, that is what health is about, isn't it? The slowest, least complicated way to die.
Yeah, it is exactly that. It's and what we're looking at is, everybody's going to die. I think, I don't think anybody's going to argue that. But the goal here should be that people, die of old age at whatever age that may be, naturally, and that's fine, and in the least painless way. So somebody dying in their sleep of pneumonia at age 110 after having a long, successful life, great. That's fine. What we don't want is what we're seeing more and more, which is that people are living out the last decades of their life, being a huge cost to themselves, to society, and really having a terrible quality of life. And that term life years is exactly what you described there. So it's perfect. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it's kind of that thing, is that we use it a lot in what we do in our coaching, like the 80-20 rule, in terms of like being good. That's a horrible word for it, in terms of nutrition and exercise and living a healthy lifestyle and having that balance. Equally, I think kind of the 80-20 rule comes into effect massively, and we again coach on this a lot, but 80% of it is nutrition and 20% of it is the rest of the stuff, including exercise and physical stuff. Obviously we are consuming arguably 3 meals, 4 meals, whatever it is, a day, every single day, and you know, might exercise 3 times a week or 5 times a week, you know, hardcore on a program or something. But yeah, we need to be on top of those things that we are doing multiple times a day, every day, and that's what's going in our mouth.
Yeah, I mean, and more so. I mean, it's really, when we look at how often we eat a day, it's more than 3 meals a day. It's, you know, it's 4, 5, 6, 7 times really. You know, we're picking up snacks and other things and so on, which is, yeah, a wonderful survival strategy to prevent starvation. But starvation is not really a problem anymore.
No.
So it's, yeah, so we are following what we should be doing in terms of the hard wiring in our brains, but it's all been spun completely.
Yeah,
which is
society of being able to grab whatever, whenever, and shove it in our mouths.
yeah, which is how it is, which is how it should be in an environment where only the natural foods are available.
Yeah.
But we've now created a society which is artificial, and we still think that way, and that a lot of that type of psychology that you're hinting at, that evolutionary psychology and behavioral psychology, is why it's so difficult, which is why losing weight is the #1 personal goal in the world.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but it's not crazy when you look at it from an evolutionary stance.
Yeah,
we're designed to get it while it's good.
Yeah, brain's trying to keep you safe, keep you alive, keep you eating, and like you say, we've
got
an artificial environment where everything is available at all times.
Yeah, it is exactly that. It is, you know, unless, you know, I mean, bar the very, you know, there will be a very few exceptions, and usually it's a very serious mental health problem or something like that. You know, people in Western countries don't starve.
No.
It's you know, the problems we're seeing now, as you see, the problems these are problems as a result of excess, not deficiency.
Yeah,
you know,
interesting, isn't
but
it?
they've got a whole market price. Yeah.
And the cure is the same as the, you know, the good and the bad. It all comes together. The cure is the same as what we're doing to actually cause these problems. It's crazy. So it's just changing habits, changing quantities, and getting an education behind you, really, isn't it, to make sure that, you know, the things that you are doing are all aiding what we said at the beginning and giving you those healthy years at the end of your life, and not in reverse.
Yeah, I mean, I would call it nutritional literacy. I think that's something which people struggle with.
Yeah.
You know, if you take, you know, 10 people into a supermarket and walk around and say, do you think this is healthy? Score it 1 to 10, you know, and give them 100 different things. You're going to get different answers.
That would be an interesting thing. I would love to do that with a group of people.
Yeah, well, there's an idea.
It is, isn't it?
And you would, yeah, and you will get different answers. And it's not saying some are right and some are wrong, but the point is that there are different belief systems out there about what is good and what isn't so good. So it's, yeah, whereas you go back 100,000 years ago, we didn't have this. This situation didn't exist.
Options were limited, and it was purely for survival. Yeah, it's so interesting, the problems that we've caused ourselves, really. But so, what would you say are the top sort of, if you could, I don't know, if you've got like a top 3 problem solving, you know, what are the top 3 illnesses, diseases that you're able to help people navigate and kind of, help them solve in your business?
Yeah, sure. So the top 3 really, it's high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and type 2 diabetes.
Yeah. Serious.
And well, they are serious things. The more serious thing, I think, is that most people don't know they've got these things. That's the problem. That's the real problem.
Yeah, sure. And then how do
most people.
I know that you kind of we've chatted a little bit before about the fact that obviously like Western medications, they kind of like attribute to that problem because obviously that's the thing that they're given to help try and solve them. And then those things obviously have their own side effects. And then you get this whole concoction of different things going on that are all really negative and really hard to subside and come away from and kind of treat the root cause through food like you do. So you obviously take a completely different stance on it and help people get away from those contraindications and those problems that they're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, where possible, for sure. Again, I'm just looking at it from a logical point of view, which is if somebody's eaten themselves into a problem, then it's most likely they can eat themselves out of that problem. That's the reality of it. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, to me, that seems quite simple,
isn't it? Yeah, it does. Yeah, when you put it like that.
Yeah, it's but that's not really where the money is, and I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But the big problem with the three things that I mentioned there are the people. This is a frog boiling slowly. That's the problem. The people that are our age, maybe in the 30s, maybe pushing into 40s. They don't always think about those things. It's usually more the motivators are power and beauty. Typically more power for men, typically more beauty for women. Usually, not always. In 2022, maybe it gets a bit muddled. I don't know. But the point here is it's usually only further down the line when something catastrophic happens to that person or somebody very close to them that they go, actually, maybe we need to do something about this. And that's where it's difficult. But it's a tough sell. It's a tough sell.
Yeah, and that's where we obviously see a lot of our conversations, probably the same as you, well, exactly the same as you come from. And it's when people, like you say, have had something terrible happen to them or to someone really close to them, and they're like, oh my gosh, I've got to do something about my lifestyle, either to try and rectify this or to enable me to not be in that situation that my loved one's just been in or whatever. And that's what does kind of provoke really good action usually, and it can be one of the only things I think that can, somebody's maybe got to get to that point and see it for what it is in that way before they can actually take that action and get themselves in the right mindset to kind of start this behavioural change, which essentially is what you and I are both aiming to create for our clients. But it's interesting, isn't it? It's got to get to that point before we see it.
Usually, I mean, there are some exceptions, but I think and that motivation tends to shift as well. This is just what I observe, is that the initial motivator might be fear, but that's not a sustainable motivator. It needs to shift from that fear of, in the case of many of my clients, the fear of dying, to the joy of living, essentially. So that transition has to happen over time.
And so when you take somebody on in that position of fear and kind of like something really terrible going on with their health, and maybe if we just take like the high blood pressure as an example, what kind of process, obviously it's all completely bespoke and unique and everyone's on their own journey and you help them with that, but what's the sort of general process that you might take them through?
Well, I usually start off with a session with them, which is something like this typically, although not always when I've just been for a walk out in the forest and I'm sat in my car, not always, right? But sometimes. But the bulk of my work, I used to think would be about educating people, but actually it's about uneducating people. And that's really important. That's a really important point. So I start off by actually finding out where somebody's sort of calibration or sort of benchmark is with their level of nutritional literacy. I come across people that will, say that grapes are terribly unhealthy because they're full of sugar, for example, this type of thing. And they're not wrong in some respect. Grapes are full of sugar. We can't deny that, right? But then I find people with high blood pressure that won't eat grapes because they think that it's going to make it worse. So they avoid grapes. and then they'll eat something which will cause a problem. So a lot of it is about unpicking the belief systems. So for me, it's sort of speaking to somebody and sort of getting an idea of what they're eating. So I typically use a platform like WhatsApp or something like that. And I ask people to send me photographs of every single thing that they eat for accountability, but also support. And I do that to get data of what they're doing. And then when I speak to them next time I do that, then I can say, okay, so you ate that, and in a nice way, I'm saying, okay, so why did you believe that was the right thing to eat?
Yeah.
And they might say, oh, because I've been told it's healthy. And then I'll come and I'll say, who told you? When? What was their motive? And most people have no idea.
Yeah.
They have no idea why they believe what they do about certain foods.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to be nasty. I'm not trying to be nasty here or ruthless, but it's to point out something which is very important. If we talk about somebody's health here, you kind of want to know what you're doing, and most people are confused, and that's that's really what we're looking at. So to answer your question, what do I do with people? Remove confusion. The reason somebody has high blood pressure is not because they were not taking high blood pressure tablets in the first place.
No,
that's not why they ended up with high blood pressure.
And yet we've added those in instead of uncomplicating the process preceding that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there are exceptions of some people who do have high blood pressure for sure, but most people are not. Those to go, and a lot of the people will do this. They will blame their genetics, and it's very rare that those scenarios do occur. And I'm sure you get that. You will get things like that. I'm big boned. It's genetic. Blah blah blah. And yes, okay, there's an element of that, but it's very small. These are lifestyle diseases that we're talking about here.
So real change with, obviously, because it is all in the behavior and the patterns, the education, like you say, the unpicking the society conditioning. And so you and I do a similar thing from a slightly different angle, but with a similar result, hopefully. It's nice to hear that that's what you do, actually, because it'll be ringing in lots of people's ears who are watching this at a later date, because that's exactly what I do for me as well. Send them pictures of everything that goes in their mouth for a little while, and it's really interesting, and it's really, really good to get it in real time as well, knowing exactly when they've eaten, what they've eaten, instead of just like a dump at the end of the day of this is breakfast, lunch, dinner. Actually understanding the habits and when the cravings and things are coming in, and looking at why and all the rest of it.
I mean that process I've found, as you've it's devastatingly effective for sure, and I still do it myself, actually, just to keep myself just accountable, and I'll look back on it and go, well, was that good, was that not good? And I'm never aiming for perfection. I think to do that is not sensible. But it's always about,
well, either does it with lifestyle. I mean, there has to be an element of flex.
And that's it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying let's have a cheat day. I think that can be problematic, that can derail people, but it depends where somebody is. If I've got somebody that has had two coronary artery bypass stents, they're type 2 diabetic, they're on 9 medications a day, can they go and have a cheat day? No. They've already had 20,000 cheat days.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about perspective, isn't it? Like you say, if exactly where somebody's at in this point of their journey, effectively. Equally, personality and how I think I hate cheat days as well. I just think everything balanced is much better, whatever that needs to look like for you and your goals. And easier for our brains to kind of adopt that new mindset then as well, isn't it? Rather than bouncing between good and bad and on plan and off plan and cheat and not.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I look at it really is I just keep it very simple. And it's not because people are simple, it's because people are bombarded by information, disinformation, misinformation, whatever you want to call these different things and silos that we have. But I just say to people, would this food have been readily available 1,000 years ago? If the answer is no, then be careful. If the answer is yes, eat it.
Exactly. The cavemen did a pretty good job of sustaining procreation and human life, and so we need to have a little look at that, I guess, and see what they were doing.
Yeah, and that's it. So that's all I'm looking at. So I'm just keeping it simple. I mean, as we know, it's not as easy in the real world to do that. Well, I understand that for sure.
Support network comes in really handy though, doesn't it? And obviously doing this alone or anywhere, any element of it alone can be really, really difficult. And mainly it is because of what you just said, it's environmental. So we've got all this stuff around us. We've got birthdays and office parties and things happening left, right, and centre, and just trying to kind of navigate your way through that alone is really difficult. But once you tap into something bigger than yourself, i.e., something like our business or your business, and you've got that, like you say, element of accountability, but also just more people in your corner, I think that becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, and I mean, and there's a huge amount of evidence to back that up. So a lot of the diseases that I've talked about, for example, you have different classifications of diseases. So some are NCDs, which are non-communicable diseases. So that's basically things which are not infectious. And then we have things like communicable diseases, which is things like, flu or COVID or whatever, right? Or common cold. You be near somebody, you can catch that disease.
Yeah.
But actually, all the evidence is supporting what you're saying. So if you go to a party and everybody there is overweight and drinking lots and eating lots, well, you're likely to catch that problem as well.
Yeah,
you're likely to drink a lot as well.
Isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah. If you go on a 10-day yoga retreat where people are just eating fruit and drinking water, well, you're likely to do the same. Whereas if you went on a 10-day yoga retreat and drank lots and ate lots of rubbish, well, you're probably going to feel a bit strange. So a lot of that there also is a sort of tribal thing, which again is an evolutionary process as well. So yeah.
Where do you I mean, I guess you get, like we do, lots of people say like, oh, well, I've tried XYZ, tried everything under the sun, but maybe I'm on keto and it's working really, really well for me. I personally hate keto from a personal and a professional point of view. But Ed always says kind of, you can pick for fat loss, you can pick literally anything. And if you're eliminating something, it will work in terms of weight loss, not necessarily fat loss, because you don't know what you're losing. Largely what we see is people are losing muscle mass and water and, as well.
Yeah.
Which ultimately, from a health perspective, that isn't what you want to achieve. But equally, because you're not measuring those variables, you don't know what you're losing. So we try and obviously steer people away from those things and really just eat in moderation that does fit in with their lifestyle, gives them the nutritional content and the energy that they need in order to carry out their sort of daily obligations as well as what they want to be doing. But I just wondered what you kind of say to people in that respect when they say like, oh, well, keto seems to be working really well for me, and etc. But we all know that it was developed for epileptic kids and in a very controlled environment, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, my first question to them is what do you mean by keto? What do you mean? And at that point, probably 94% of people don't know the answer.
No, they'll just say, oh, I'm not eating, I don't know, pasta, rice, bread, and you're like, well, there's carbs in fruit and veg, but yeah, how many grams of carbs?
Yeah. So these terms that get kicked around, which are all much of a muchness, whether it's been marketed as keto or South Beach or Atkins or whatever, or they're all the same thing. They're just saying, hey, let's just remove a food group, and the easiest one to do is going to be carbohydrates because that's what we think works. And for weight loss, for sure, it will work in short term. But when I say to somebody, so what describe, when I usually, when somebody says that, I kick it back at them. I say, could you describe to me what actually you mean by the ketogenic process? How does that actually work? And we work through it. So it's education. And when they actually understand what that process is, then they go, hold on a minute, I've been ripped off here. I've actually been told something that wasn't true.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing that to cause any confrontation or conflict. I'm doing it because I want them to understand that they've probably, often these people have tried multiple things over many, many years. it's to get them to understand that these are all just marketing terms.
Yeah.
And they're marketing terms because the primary focus of that company is to make money, which is fine. I mean, the core of any business is to make money, but it's the ethical side behind it.
Yeah.
So it's just become a fancy name as an example. So I look at it, and I'm not against any particular way of eating. What I am about is saying, let's have scientific accuracy if we are going to start using terms. That's the important bit.
And how do you feel about people cutting out large food groups? I mean, it's never going to be a good plan, is it? Well, unless you're like, they've got something very medical that needs specific attention, and that will help.
I mean, the only time I really come across it, and this has been, and so to give you perspective here, this is 3,000 people over 12 years. I've come across 3 people who've had something called protein losing entropy, type of disease where they really struggle with protein, and they need specific proteins. So in that situation, we need to be careful. But they will know about that. They will have known that. They've had that their whole life.
Yeah.
Or if somebody has type 1 diabetes, we need to be careful. If somebody has multiple sclerosis, we might need to be careful with certain types of fats. But if we're talking about generalized weight loss for the general population, or dropping blood pressure, or dropping cholesterol, removing entire food groups is absolute lunacy. And it's going to end in disaster very quickly.
Yeah.
It may well result in weight loss very quickly also.
Yeah.
But the rebound effect is going to be terrible, not just physically, but also mentally. It's going to affect that person.
Yeah, for sure. And in the ways that you just described, but also just literally in terms of lifestyle, it's really difficult to maintain removing food groups, isn't it? Especially when you are like around other people, you're not fully in control, and then that starts to drive you insane because you're not able to stick to what you're trying to do. And not a good plan.
No, it's not sensible. I mean, I'm not entirely against these things in a very short term, I think, and I could take that to the extreme. So if I have somebody who comes to me who's hugely overweight, then I'm not trained to do this, but then I might recommend something like some sort of inpatient water fasting, for example, and that sort of thing, which is where people will literally just be water fasting for 14, maybe 21 days, which is very, very, this is inpatient stuff. Right. Now you're removing all food groups here, and people are purely having water, right? But it is extremely effective, but that's the extremes. So that's when it can be useful. Those sorts of, but these are exceptional scenarios.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, interesting. Yeah, and obviously our job is to make sure that we help people before they get anywhere near that position, ideally.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's it. And the typical sort of person that would end up in that situation is somebody who would have ignored your advice for, for years. They would have taken all the fad diets. They would have said it won't happen to me, etc., and then they end up in A&E, and then they wake up, they've had some surgical procedure, and then they've been through some sort of psychological assessment, and then they end up in that sort of scenario. And usually they turn out okay, but the problem is they then had, but prior to that, they've had they've probably had 25 years of agony. That's no way to live.
No. So just to, thank you so much for your time. It's been so interesting. And just to kind of round up, if we kind of give our maybe our top tips for our general sorts of people that come to us for support. Mine always are very similar, because we get a similar sort of person. They're probably looking for fat loss, but also want to be able to increase their fitness and their strength. So there's like a few goals to marry up there, and from my point of view, usually it's all bespoke, it's all tailored, but there'll be a protein goal to hit, there'll be a calorie goal to try and hit each day, and hydration and sleep are super important. And that's kind of my top things that I want people to be really checked in with and really you know, work with. So and from your point of view, if people are to look after their health in the other sort of way of looking at that, and it's not about strength and whatever, but it is about general health and well-being, what would your sort of top tips be for somebody to look after themselves from a nutritional point of view?
So again, I would strip it right back to saying, hey, we're mammals. So that's kind of simple. And I would say, all right, what do we need to do? So drink water, and we've been given 2 legs by whatever you believe. Use them.
Yeah.
Just, that's it. So drink water and walk.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, that's my, you know, not so secret to just actually getting some results. And most people don't do those 2 things.
No. And again, lifestyle makes it, our environment makes it for some people very hard to do that, because you're, slaving away attached to a computer, however many hours, whatever.
I could see the valid argument in the second, in that people might find, I'm not saying excuse, but might find reason to not walk at all. In that they just simply are, you know, getting in their car, maybe going somewhere, getting whatever. They don't really walk. Fine, I can get that. But to not drink water is ridiculous. In the countries that we live in, you know, where you are, there's going to be probably, you know, within probably 20, 30 steps, I don't know, there's probably going to be 6 taps that you can drink water from.
Indeed.
So the notion that not drinking water is simply because we don't value it, because it's so abundant. So
it's so readily accessible, and it just becomes something that's it's so simple and so right what you've just said. But I think a really good reminder for all of us that we're so lucky that it is so readily available, and let's get it in.
That's it. It is, you know, it's you know, it we all know these things. Implementing it is harder for sure, which is why people will, you know, employ our services. But without water, we die very quickly. Very quickly. We don't die very quickly if we don't eat chocolate hobnobs.
No. So interesting. I know that I shared a quote from my son yesterday when he told me that food is medicine, isn't it, mummy? And he's always thinking about these sorts of things. And I think children in general are quite tuned into this stuff now, and especially in our house, because we're constantly, he hears and we're talking to clients, talking to each other about this stuff. But he also said yesterday, he said to his sister, actually, at dinner, they had water. They both had water at their dinner. He said, Fee, what would you drink if there was no water? Like, how would we drink anything? And she'd said to him, well, I drink milk. And I said, there is water in milk. But if there was no water, we wouldn't have any milk, because the cows wouldn't be alive. And we got into this really deep, and they're 4 and 5. We got into this really deep conversation about how water does sustain life. And you know, there would be no life if there was no water. It's just, such an interesting thing that we all know, we never think of, because like you say, it's so readily available. But a very good reminder.
It is. And the closing point on that is, children are incredibly inquisitive, and we should be setting good examples for our children, but also listening to them as well. When they ask questions, if we don't know the answer, it's our duty to go and find the answers. It's a good point. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Adam. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we can have another chat in a few months or something and go a bit deeper. But thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. All right. Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.